Cool. So we can record in 3, 2, 1, and ooh. What's up, everybody? You're tuned into Telescope Vision's Golden Generation, and I am your host, the Nature Boy. And today we have a really exciting episode lined up for you. We have someone who's such a phenomenal being, really powerful. You can really feel it when they talk through the technology, and someone who's just unapologetically them, authentic to the max, and just a gem of a soul. So please welcome Tumi Moloto.
Hi. What a beautiful introduction. I'm like, oh yeah, that is true. And that's an aspect of myself. And wow, I love that. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm really just grateful for this moment. I'm thankful for your time, and just, yeah, I'm just grateful to be here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how are you, like spiritually, mentally, physically? How are you doing?
How am I doing? It's so funny you asked that because I have like a policy with my therapist and my mom about like I don't when people say how are you, I just give a gesture, I'm like because it's such a funny question. It's like how am I distilled in this moment? I usually do some sort of like body check-in. I woke up feeling good. I was very chatty this morning. Like I love speaking to myself. So I spent the whole morning just being like, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you're so right. Blah, 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 blah. And I feel like settled in my body. I feel, a bit anxious because I just feel anxious sometimes. And yeah, I think that's like some of what I'm experiencing at the moment.
Wow, that's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
so like I kind of want to just like really give you a big shout out. Like I really want to commend you for what you did with the summer project, how you were
Mm,
able to initiate that project, to bring African literature and make it accessible and available to children, like in the east side of
yeah,
Joburg and also in the Makers Valley. Do you kind of
exactly.
want to just explain how that whole process came about and why you started that whole initiative?
Yeah, it's so funny because it's something I rarely speak about nowadays, and I feel like people can even forget that it's something that is, in my world. But basically, I was studying in the States at the time, and there was this opportunity to like get funding to do a summer project, and like $2,000 worth of funding, just that they would basically like give to you to do something that you're passionate about. So I was like, I have to think of something. And my mom was actually doing a lot of work. My mom does a lot of community development work. So she has all of these amazing connections in Makers Valley, and is doing a lot of work there. And I'm big onto only, I feel like in community work, there's this tendency to be like, we're going to go into this community and help them, and it's like, you don't even have connections with people in this community. You don't know them, know what would be valuable to them or not. And I think this is where like a ton of projects don't work out because it's not connected to the community. So I knew my mom had these connections, and together we were like, what if we did something around books, right? Just making books more accessible to people, and having them be in public places, because libraries often feel so inaccessible, and there aren't that many libraries around that also stock African-centric literature. So we were like, what if we just created book boxes in places where people are already gathering, right? So that it really becomes integrated in the community. And if we focused it just on African literature in different languages, not English, because that was hugely important to us too, and really just creating opportunities for people to read and to fall in love with reading and to develop a culture of reading. And so, yeah, we did, half of it was like that $2,000 grant, and we basically had that matched in individual donations. So we created this like big master list where people could buy a very specific book, and then send it to the project, and we'd include it in the library. So everything was very curated, because I think a lot of the time with books, people are just like, oh, here are just books, read them. And then the books are totally unrelatable to people and their context, you know? So for each space, we thought about what books are really gonna have synergy here, are gonna connect with people here, what languages are people speaking in the community, you know, like what languages do we have to think about intentionally bringing in, like Lingala, and yeah, you know, just and having and you know, just having all these in Amharic, and you know, just all these languages from across the continent, also to kind of I want to say incite this feeling of a broader connection to the continent when we deal with so much xenophobic violence in the country, you know. So that was kind of some of the thinking around it.
Whoa, that's just amazing. Because I know you guys even start like Swahili, um, Sutu, Isulu,
Yeah,
Xhosa, like,
exactly. Yeah. No, in languages I had never heard of before, like Lingala, you know, which is spoken in the DRC, and I think different parts in Central Africa. And then we just had someone come in the other day, and like biggest smile on their face. They were like, "This is my language," you know. And you forget that those moments are so powerful for people to be like, "Oh my goodness, I'm seeing a book in my language," you know. And for many people it's like I've never seen, whether it's like a cartoon or a novel or whatever the kind of book is, like I've never seen my language represented in this way, and I've never seen myself, you know, and my people represented in this way. So it's really beautiful to have that.
yeah, that's amazing. Because at the end of the day, you know, knowledge is power. So if you're making these books
Mm,
available to these kids, it's so powerful and it's beneficial for the community.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So are these libraries still around right now? The five public spaces?
They are. Right now, I think there's more like 4 of them that are operational, because there's one library that, you know, a lot of it was playing. At the time, we had one idea for a library space that would travel, and that one like hasn't worked out in the way that we expected it to. So I believe that there are 4 right now that are operational, that people are using, you know, benefiting from just being with the books. And we really wanted it to be, I knew that I wanted like myself not to really have that much control over it once it was done, you know, because then it still feels like I'm this outsider, you know, coming in and being like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I really wanted there to be community ownership and community buy-in, so that people would really feel like, oh, these are our library spaces, the Hadidas are having a good time. And we have ownership over these books, and we can connect with them whenever we want to. So yeah, and we just launched a new one a few months ago. And so yeah, yeah, it's all going well.
That's incredible. That's so inspiring as well. Um,
Yeah.
I know that you are into a lot of alternative holistic measures in terms of healing. Do you kind of want to talk to us about psilocybin and mushrooms? Because I feel like that's a conversation that not everyone has and knows about, and I think it's going to be very beneficial for people to find out. You know.
Oh yes. It's kind of like my favorite thing to speak about is psilocybin mushrooms, because you know, now I'm this person that like speaks about them all the time, and so
Yeah.
many people associate me with mushrooms, which is really fun. But 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, I like was like, I will never ever, you know, eat a mushroom in my life. I was very much like, no, you know, like that's just not my thing, and I'm never going to try it, and I'm never going to be into it. And I had a friend that was like, just consider, you know, like, because I really bought into a lot of that propaganda against drugs, you know, that
Yeah.
like these things are bad and they're harmful, and you'll take them once in your whole life, be an absolute mess, you know, and you'll just spiral into, you know, there's like so much that's like, don't do this. And when I took them for the first time, I was like, oh my God, why didn't anyone tell me about this? Like, I felt like I had been lied to by the whole world about the potential of this medicine. And so that's when I just started speaking about it all the time. I was telling friends, I was telling my family, I was just like, anyone that would listen, I was like, have you heard about psilocybin mushrooms? And it actually ended up being amazing because so many people felt the same stigma and shame that I did, like you see also movies where psychedelics are painted as this thing that's just like super weird and and just like, yeah, there are just all these images that we have about what that experience looks like. So then when I took mushrooms for the first time, and I just realized like, whoa, this is helping me to work through my trauma. This is helping me to see things kind of from like a big picture perspective, that's like bigger than my human. Like I'm able to kind of step beyond my ego and say like, oh, what's actually happening here? I feel like I connected with God like really for the first time. Like I had that because, and I hear this now that I take people through, their journeys with the medicine. And even I was journey guiding someone recently, and they're I think in their like late 50s or 60s, and they've been in this space of like oneness and universal consciousness and a very spiritual being. But after taking the mushrooms, they were like, that was really the first time that I had this embodied experience of knowing God. And so that's what got me really excited, is like, we think so much in the society, but what if people could have this like direct experience of connection to God and connection to own divinity, and connection to like this incredibly healing force, So that's when I became an absolute Silent, and really became passionate about showing people that this is an incredibly safe medicine. Like there are fewer psilocybin related hospitalizations than there are cannabis related hospitalizations. And a lot of us are pretty chilled with cannabis now. Like we don't think of cannabis as this wildly dangerous, plant medicine. And psilocybin is even safer in terms of hospitalizations. And people have these amazing experiences, and like there's so many studies that are coming out that are showing people that like this medicine has huge potential to heal the world. But also indigenous people have been saying this for thousands of years, like I think often we come in and we're like, Western science now says, and it's like, actually people have been saying this, people knew, our ancestors knew, and it feels like this ancestral connection becomes possible through that medicine, which I think is really exciting too.
Wow, that's really powerful and also really insightful, especially for someone who hasn't, experimented with psychedelics. Because in my opinion, I think that psychedelics are, it's not like a recreational drug. Like if you're going to take it to get fucked
Yeah.
up, you're going to get fucked up. you know, like
Yeah, yeah,
it should be respected. Like it's a tool for wisdom. If you literally
exactly.
set your intention and be intentional about what trip you're about to go on, it's going to open the
Yeah.
door to so many possibilities. And, you're going to see another dimension of yourself that you never even could even believe that could be seen.
Exactly. No, I constantly have experiences where I'm like, I had no idea the medicine could do that. Like every time I go on a journey or I guide someone through a journey, it's so different. And what they're able to experience is so different based on their intention, and the setting and all of those things. But you just realize sometimes I'm like, what can't psilocybin do? Like I'm yet to see, because I do think we're living in a world where so much of what we're suffering with is rooted in trauma. And psilocybin is so masterful at helping us to heal trauma. And I'm always interested in exploring more of that and the why, but I don't know, there's something about that connection with God that just like blows everything, wide open and into perspective, which is
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, you mentioned
Yeah.
such a interesting point, how psilocybin literally digs into the root of your trauma. Because, as our being right now, some people aren't really conscious and aren't able to really just sit and just be aware of their own like patterns and their own traumas. They kind of try running away from it.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you're on a psychedelic like psilocybin, there's no running. It's
There's
just
no running.
you and yourself. That's you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what would be a recommended dosage for someone who's beginning in their psychedelic or psilocybin journey?
So it totally depends, right? Because when I started taking the medicine, I would take 3.5 grams. Like that was every journey, 3.5 grams. And that's kind of, some people will consider like a average dose is like 2.5 to 3.5. Anything, I would say in the like 0.1 grams to the 1 gram range is more of a microdose. But at the same time, I've had like mind-blowing journeys at 0.4 grams, So I actually think that there's a lot more complexity. And sometimes I think like if you're in the space and the intention and you just use a little bit of the medicine, you can still go to these astronomical heights. But I would say, it's so hard to answer questions like these because it's like, it depends, but really I think it's a checking in with yourself of like, what experience am I ready for? And if you're ready for the kind of experience where, your ego is blown wide open and you potentially meet God, then, look for more of like a 3.5 gram dosage, but if you're just wanting to see, oh, could this benefit me and my, anxiety or my depression or, like, then maybe start with the microdosing protocol. I have a whole guide. People can find it. It's for free. If you DM Instagram, actually, I'll just send it to you. But it like guides people through literally everything that you could have to know about dosage, intention, set and setting. Like I've really created it as a resource for people to work regardless of where you're starting from, just learn how to create a connection with the medicine. So for anyone who's listening, they can reach out to me. Yeah.
It's amazing. And would you recommend the person who's going to be experimenting with this for the first time, should they do it with a guide or should they just do it with people that they feel comfortable around or even by themselves?
Yeah, I think it's once again, it's one of those things where it's so dependent on who you are, because the first time I did it, I was with people I knew, but none of them had ever taken psilocybin mushrooms before. So they didn't have any frame of reference for what I was experiencing, but I felt confident in my ability to navigate that experience for myself. Some people really want to have a guide, and have totally different experiences when they're guiding or being guided rather, because it frees up a level of safety in your body. You know that there's this person here watching out for you and they know what to look for and they know how to keep you safe. So then you don't have to, be like freaking out internally. You can just allow yourself to go into the experience. I also journey alone all the time, so I don't tell people not to do anything. Like I love journeying by myself. Sometimes I do have a guide with me, sometimes I don't, but if you have a lot of fear, then I'd say have people around you, just for the first time. In time, you can experiment with what works for you. But yeah, it's kind of I'll always say this, it's my annoying thing, but I'm always like, it depends on the person. It just depends on what you and your soul journey are ready for.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point about how what you're ready for and setting the right intentions.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, what was that like, that shaking moment that happened to you or that you experienced that kind of like set you off on your path towards your spiritual journey that you're currently on?
Oh, what a wonderful moment. I'm very big into the idea that like what we see as crisis as a world is actually a huge moment for breakthrough if we can recognize it as that and like work with that energy in that direction. And I think what's happening as a world, and like especially as it relates to mental health, is that people who are experiencing these crises that could lead to breakthrough are being like shut down, and it's like, don't go into that, don't look into that, just do this thing to suppress or to ignore or take this medication. And I support everyone taking medication, but I don't support kind of the pharmaceutical, industrial complex insistence that every single being has to take medication. I think we are over medicating people. And so like for me, what that looked like was I was I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression for a while. And so I was taking medication for that. I was taking such high amounts of medication. And then eventually I had this moment, and really, I understand it now as like a buildup of traumatic events that eventually my being was just like, enough. We have had enough, and what that looked like to the outside world was bipolar disorder, and that was my diagnosis, and I was hospitalized for suicidal ideation. But inside of myself, I was like, I think there's something else happening here. I felt way more connected to spirit and to my ancestors than I had like in my entire life, while I was also being called mad and insane, and given these different diagnoses and told to go on antipsychotics and, like having this whole experience. And it just made me realize that there was something more. And I was being told that I would have to go on medication or I would spiral out of control and die. It was very fear mongering. It was like, you're just going to lose control. You're not going to have any real sense of reality, blah, blah, blah. But I just had the sense inside of myself that like, there's something else happening here, like, there's just something else, and so I trusted that. And it was hard because I just suffered for many months. Like I just toiled around with that darkness that lived inside of me. And there was no respite, there was no break. It was just constantly that. But through having to be there so consistently, like I that thing, where we say with psilocybin, you can't run. It's just you and you. So I had to be like, damn, so it's just me and me now. And if I'm going to find a way to survive, I have to look at these things that are so desperately, wanting to get my attention. And so then I did, and I was like, whoa, that totally blew my mind open, to what this reality is about, what this lifetime is about, what we're doing here on earth, what I'm doing here on earth, And so that was the beginning. And then I just suffered for some time and I learned, and I suffered and I learned, and I suffered and I learned, and now here I am.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, you're so strong. I mean, to go through those experiences, especially going through it alone. I mean, did you
Oh
have
my God.
did you have anyone that you could, kind of talk to, or kind of someone that could kind of relate to what you were going to?
So the beauty in all of this is that, so my brother was diagnosed with bipolar disorder as well. He kind of went through the same storyline that I went through, but when he was 16. So it'd been some time, but I was able to talk to him about like what I felt was actually happening for me. And I have a mom who's so open-minded. And so, I was able to talk to her, but there's always a limit, when someone can sit and empathize with your experience, but like when people aren't in the experience with you, it can feel really lonely. So for a long time it did, which is why I created the first season of Human Becoming podcast, because I was like, I feel crazy, but I don't feel like that I'm the only one having these thoughts, I don't think I'm the only one making these connections or struggling with these things. And then I realized that, oh, there's a whole community of people who are going through this. There's a whole community of people who relate to this moment of crisis, and it opening something totally different. So I had a lot of people around me. I really reclaimed the category of insane for myself in that moment. I was like, insanity is actually this really misunderstood thing that happens to people. But I had a lot of insane people around me at the time, which helped, because we could all just be like, it's not us, it's the society, like, how are we the only ones who are having these moments of like, this is absolutely bizarre. What we're doing as humans right now is bizarre. The way we're relating to the planet is bizarre. The way that we're so disconnected from ourselves is fucking bizarre. Like all of it is just weird. And yet you look outside and like, especially pre-COVID, everything was business as usual and people were acting as if, like, everything is fine, we're just killing our planet and everything is fine, and we're killing each other and everything is fine, and we're on this doom train of capitalism and everything is fine. And you're just like, I'm personally reacting to the fact that everything is not okay. Like nothing is okay here, you know? So yeah, support is important. And I think people often think they can make it through these experiences alone, but you can't. You really can't.
I mean, that's so true. No one exists on this planet as an island. You know, we need each other, especially as human beings. We are our best selves when we're connected to other people.
Yeah. And we thrive on connection, you know, like I thrive on connection. Like it's so human. We've only survived because of connection and our connections to other people. And it's like now we live in this society where those connections are so um like just skewed, you know, like this is how I'm thinking of them, you know, like they've just been really morphed and changed and like, and I think that is what people are reacting to at some level, you know, in all of our suffering is that like, what is my connection to my ancestors like? What is my connection to the land like? What is my connection to the earth like? What is my connection to myself like? What is my connection to other beings like? What is the quality of those connections? Is there a quality of those connections, or am I just totally disconnected like I was, you know? And so that moment of just suffering showed me where I could connect with another being, where I could connect with myself more deeply, where I was being asked to connect with my ancestors and the earth, you know? Um, and so often we're just taught to dull that voice inside of us that's like telling us something needs to change here, or there's something more that's needing to happen. Um, and so for me, that was what was really special about that time, was just like, oh, back into connection, back into connection. And I think that's what humanity has to do now, is like we have to move back into connection.
Wow, that's so true. So during this time and that period, how you were connecting more to your ancestors, did that kind of lead to a lot of revelations of you realizing that you were a spiritual healer?
You know, it even started, I had an inkling, you know, like probably months before all of this started, which is when I first went to consult with the traditional healer, and I was like, something, so that felt like the premonition, you know, of like something is going to change here. But definitely going through that whole experience, I definitely demystified what the healer is for me, because I think we often think of the healer as like, I don't know, this super mystical being that exists on the periphery of society. And like, in some ways we do, you know, but I think our healing gifts come from the things we've healed inside of ourselves. And while we're here on earth, you, me, all of us, we're being asked to heal things, you know? And then it's like, there's things that only you know from your healing journey that now your ancestors, God, the universe, your higher self, however you know, relate to the divine, is asking you to bring into human consciousness, into this bigger project, you know? And it's like, for me, that was the realization, like, oh, now I've had these experiences so that I can work with other people having this experience to find greater levels of freedom, you know, to find greater levels of truth and authenticity and vulnerability and the things that will actually give their lives meaning, because capitalism totally um, disconnects us from any real sense of meaning, you know, and then gives us like this artificial meaning, you know, that comes from the work that you do, you know, or your job, or how much money you make, or where you fit into the class system, or, you know, into all of these systems of hierarchy. And it's like, I actually want to reconnect people to, because that's what I've done myself, is like, what is real meaning for me, you know, and how do I help other people find real meaning, not this like meaning that's handed to us by a system that doesn't care about us at all, you know, like at all.
Wow, that's so amazing, because not everyone does that. Not everyone wants to go in deep and really sit with themselves and ask themselves the real questions. Who am I? What do I want? What is my purpose? How can I help serve?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's an
Yeah.
important thing. And like, I love what you're doing right now. It's like you transmuting all your experiences, like in the Indian culture, they call it good karma. You're using that
Mm,
transmutation to bring about good situations for other people that they can use to bring about even more good situations for other people. and
Yeah.
it's rooted in your dharma, its purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think there's something so powerful. I think I get the sense that you are that this is you as well. But like connecting to your role and your purpose, because I think capitalism almost like literally we're given one, you know, and then we also, because we see how people receive affirmation or love or care in society, we associate that with this very specific image of success, you know, which really looks like being at the top of the pyramid. And then sometimes the whole society just starts striving for that, for being at the top of the pyramid, you know. And I think what's been so freeing for me is just like, I don't care about what is my purpose, you know, like not how can I be seen as successful in the society, or how can other people, you know, really affirm me in the society, but like how can I live out what I came here to do? And I think that's what we all have to do, you know.
Yeah, it's not getting stuck in a rat race.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And literally what you said now, just embracing that your true self, you know. At the end of the day, we are pure potentiality, you know, we are infinite beings, spiritual beings with
Exactly.
occasional human experiences. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So while all this was going on, you mentioned it a bit earlier that that's what kind of birthed the Human Becoming podcast.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. Oh, my baby. Yeah. So for me, it was like I had all these experiences of making connections between things, you know, like these things that society was telling me were totally separate, like my experiences of being oppressed under, you know, the patriarchy and white body and capitalism, and the colonial system, you know, is disconnected from my spirituality. And there's something that like those two worlds don't meet, you know, like trauma and spirituality also doesn't meet the world of sexuality and sensuality and bodies. And you know, like I had all these things that I was like, because I studied African history in college, and so I was so interested in history, which is so tied to my interest in trauma, you know. And there were just all these different things that I was like, bring it together. And I had to bring it together for my own healing, you know, to realize that like, oh, my body is reacting to all of this trauma that I've experienced, big societal trauma, intergenerational trauma, past life trauma. Like I was just like, there's many levels, you know. Um, and then I was like, I want to share that. I want to share what I've learned because for me, the big thing that felt so lonely in that whole experience was, why isn't anyone else talking about this? Like, why can't I find the people who are sharing this with me, you know? And sometimes I'd find people and I'd feel like, you know, that meme of the person making all the different links between things, like that's how I felt. Yeah, literally just like um and then I was just committed to offering that to people and just telling my story, essentially, you know. Even though there were bigger themes that I was thinking about too, I really was just like, I want people to know that there is something on the other side of this if you really want to work with that energy, you know, like there is greater freedom and greater truth and greater authenticity that can be found on the other side of something that almost has killed you, you know, something that is one of the most challenging experiences of your life. Now I feel is one of the most meaningful experiences of my life that I would not change for the world, for what it has taught me, you know. And so I just wanted to say, like, then there you go, you know. And so many people then resonated, which was wild for me because I thought I was telling a story that was really just my own. And so it also blew open that like, oh, there's something bigger happening on this planet. Many people are being affected by it. And those people who are being affected by it are finding synergy with this podcast.
Well, like,
Yeah, I also was like, and a breath.
yeah, um, that's it's really inspirational how you were able to be so vulnerable and really just express your being. It takes courage to do that. I think that's a vulnerability, the thing that's frowned upon in society, but it's a strength. It takes courage
Absolutely.
to be vulnerable and be true to who you are and express what you've been through. And like we talked about earlier on, that can help someone else dealing with what they're going through.
Yeah. And even there, I just want to say, like, I'm such a messy human being. Like, I'm such a messy human being. There's so much darkness that lives inside of me. There's so much light that lives inside me. There's so much happening here, you know? And so still with the podcast, it is incredibly brave and courageous. And I have moments where I'm like, now I'm sitting with the episode that I'm supposed to release on Sunday, and I'm like, you know, because I'm constantly pushing myself to say the things that I don't want to say, that we're not supposed to say, right? To speak about the experiences where people are like, oh my God, I experienced that too. But I never thought I could tell anyone about that, you know, especially speaking more about sex and sexuality. For me, that's really the avenue to just speak about the things that we're all too scared to speak about, you know? And it's been fascinating. It's a spiritual journey for me to create the podcast. You know, it's not just like la la la, because I'm showing up not as like the guru and the light worker and the, you know, the like healer who knows everything. I'm just showing up as a messy human being who's constantly trying to figure out how to become more human and embody more of the complexity and more of the mess and the shadow and the stuff that the society has judged so intensely in me, but is a part of who I am. Yeah. And that's what I'm really turned on by, like at the moment, is like going into those edgy places that are going to make people so uncomfortable, but we have to look at them, you know, like we have to look at the darkness. We have to look at the fear. We have to look at the shame. Shame is my favorite one. We have to look at the trauma, you know. We have to be alone in the room with ourselves and say, like, it's just you and me now, because it's necessary. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty is in the imperfections. And like you raised such an interesting point,
Exactly.
you know, about how in terms of, you know, your shadow self, your darkness, your dark intentions. I think
Mm.
everyone in life tries to, you know, shun it away and like hide it in a little corner, but that doesn't do you any good. You have to literally integrate your shadow self and your higher self, and to get to that equilibrium,
Exactly.
synthetic moment of where you that spiritual, like I see it myself as like spiritual warrior. In order to get to that spiritual warrior, I have to blend in my higher self and integrate my shadow self. I have to be aware of
Exactly.
my unconscious patterns, my ego, like when I have ego moments, and like just being aware of those
Yeah.
things and not trying to change anything about it, just witnessing it,
Just seeing.
observing
Exactly.
it. And then
Yeah.
with that, because you're aware of those, you know, that your shadow self, it's not gonna pop on you and just surprise you out of nowhere, because you prepared for it. You prepared
Yeah.
literally, and that's how you're
Yeah.
able to get to that synthetic moment of being that spiritual warrior, transcending the
Yeah.
spell and reaching a new realm.
Absolutely. No, and there's so much in what you just said, like so much richness there. But I feel like when we don't do that, then that starts to haunt us, you know, like you were saying, when you're with it, it doesn't just gain on you. But then when you're not with it, it really will, you know, and it'll just be waiting and waiting and waiting. And then, you know, and you're like, damn, okay, I didn't see you, you know, and I think it's so, for me, it's been really powerful because like there are layers in entering the shadow realms, you know, and you're like, oh, wow. And, you know, and you're watching and you're keeping that non-judgmental viewpoint, you know, but then sometimes you come up against dark stuff, you know, like I've been realizing this inside of me. I'm like, oh, wow, there's some really dark stuff in here, you know, like stuff that I never expected. Like I had a moment, I took a microdose of psilocybin mushrooms the other day and I was like, am I evil? Like I was genuinely, I went into my mom's study and I was like, Mom, I have to tell you something. I'm evil. Like I was like, I have to come out as an evil person just because I was experiencing this level of darkness inside of myself that I had never met, you know, and it was so dark that I called it evil, but I realized that's just a judgment, you know, all that there is God. This is just another aspect, you know. but it's scary work, and more people are starting to speak about it now. But I also want people to know that it's not just like la li li, haha. It's
Mhm.
like it's
It's deep,
terrifying sometimes, you know.
deep work.
And yeah, but it's that's where, you know, when you said like it's brave, it's courageous, because it is. To sit with those parts of yourself is terrifying, and to do it is so courageous. It really is.
Literally. And it's good, like
Yeah.
you said now, how you were experiencing those thoughts. And I think it's good that you expressed it, because when you express it, you release it.
Oh, exactly. I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Human Becoming podcast, does it kind of revolve around sexual liberation, spiritual liberation, and political liberation? Those three
So
spheres.
it's interesting that my little Venn diagram is each season of the podcast is so different. So like the first season was just me exploring, okay, I went mad, I went insane. What does that mean? And then it's just me exploring that question, really, you know, and meeting some. And even then I realized, even though I didn't think about shadow so actively, a lot of it was about meeting my anger, meeting my like deep rage, you know, meeting my fears, and meeting so many aspects of myself that were like, hey, hi, hello, introduce us please. And the second season, because I'm you know, I work as a sex and relationship coach, and I'm, you know, training as an advanced practitioner in this very particular method at the moment. And it's making me think a lot about where all these things meet, you know, because they sound so separate. Like, oh, Tumi was an African history major and they've studied trauma, and then now they're a sex coach, and like, you know, like all of these realms, and they're also going through an initiation, you know, like all of these realms are different. But in my heart, I know that there's like this one locus, there's the central point that connects all of them. And so season 2 is really about exploring that little place, you know. um and but it's still told through my stories. Like, what are the shames that I struggle with? What are the things that have helped me to become more free in my sexual liberation journey? Like owning my boundaries, you know, and doing a lot of healing with my body. And so I've just wanted to share that sexual stage of the liberation journey, but I want people to understand how it's deeply connected to spirituality, and it's deeply connected to politics, because I feel like patriarchy and colonization and white body supremacy all have this intense interest on um, like oppressing the body and constraining the body, and not allowing the body to be a body, you know. And so much of that is about like constraining our sexual energy. We live in like such a sexually repressed society and world, where we're not allowed to be sexual beings, and we're not allowed to be erotic beings, you know. And so many people carry fear around their relationship to their sexuality. They carry shame around their relationship to their sexuality. This is all spiritual shit to work with, you know, and to work through. So I wanted people to understand that it's like not just sex, you know. It's so much bigger. It's just one doorway into this healing that is possible for us as humans.
I love that, especially about body healing and how you owning your own boundaries. You know, I think
Mm.
so. As being a sexual coach, can you kind of explain what sexual energy is?
It's so interesting because I think it's different to all of us, you know, like, and I so hesitate towards definitions, because I'm like, what it is to me and what it is to you. But I suppose to me, I relate to actually erotic energy far more than I like relate to sexual energy. I think sexual energy is this energy that we can experience, that is for me tied to our erotic energy,
So
which feels
are
like
they
the
different?
big. I feel it's like it's not so much that I think sexual energy, I feel like if there was like erotic energy is here, and then there's like little different manifestations of it in the world. But I think sexual energy is a part of erotic energy, but erotic energy is so much bigger than just sexual energy, you know. It's like an isolated aspect. It's so hard to you know, like
Is it like
frame and be like,
arousal?
what is this? Well, I think that's the thing, is for me, erotic energy is about arousal. It is about what turns us on, but that's also about connecting to like our deepest core. Like for me, the core, like for me, God is sexual energy. God is erotic energy, you know. God is actually this like creative force, this life energy that all of us have access to, but for me is deeply connected to, because it's not about partner sex, you know, like it's not even about, you know, having sex with yourself, but it's about being connected to that energy inside of you that wants, that desires, you know, that like is able to connect with other people, that's able to get turned on, you know. Yeah, I feel like that for me is part of it, but it's also so much bigger. It's about power, and it's about death, and it's about like it's I think that's what I'm struggling with now, or not struggling with, but exploring, is just how much bigger is sexual energy than we've given it credit for. We've taken it and said it's this one thing in society, and it's when two people have sex. And it's like, what if it's actually what flows through our lives and our bodies every day, you know? What if every connection with another person is an exchange of erotic energy, which it feels like to me, you know? And so part of my journey is just like allowing myself to erotically connect with everyone whenever I want to, you know, and to be connected to my sexual energy whenever I want to, and to be turned on by the world, because it's like we get to do that. We get to have that experience as humans. But for now, it's still very like, you know, zipped up inside of.
Yeah, I get you. Like, I read this really interesting book by Master Mantak Chia. He's like this Asian like sage, and he talks a lot about sexual energy and how, in its essence, sexual energy is life force. Like if you think about it in retrospection,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
do you know how powerful sexual energy is? Like it's used to create human beings.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
it's a powerful thing. And I think one thing that I've kind of like experienced, I've been practicing a lot of yoga this year, and I've always
Yeah.
known a lot about sexual energy, but now like I literally, like, you can feel it, how potent and powerful this thing is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once you like start reflecting on it, you can actually understand like, whoa, I can actually channel this energy and put it into creative pursuits. I can put it into building things. I can put it into people, like connecting with people. Like there's so many things you can do with that sexual
Exactly.
energy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really what I want to get people to, because it's like, yeah, you like, I think all of my everything that I create in the world comes from that place. You know, it comes from that deep connection. And I'll say to the erotic, but literally life force, creative energy, sexual energy. Like there are so many things that we can call it, but it's like, and it does feel like God. It really does, you know, because it's like that's how everything in our universe is created, you know. And sex is so powerful. Like even just speaking about the like physical act of sex, but I also think sex is so much more expansive than we allow it to be, you know. And we can think of so many different acts as sex, but sex is so powerful, and it just makes so much sense. Like I feel like something that I want to speak about more is how sexual repression is a big part of white body supremacy, of colonization, of all systems of oppression. Like part of this project to oppress humans is about oppressing our sexual energy, because when we're not connected to that energy, we're far less powerful, you know, we're far more obedient. It's far easier to manipulate and control us, you know, when we're not connected to that. But when we are connected to that, we're so powerful, you know. And we also have a greater sense of our connection to God, you know, and what is possible for us in that connection. And so, yeah. I love these conversations. I like just want everyone to start having these conversations, because it's just so sad too that like it's your birthright, it's my birthright to feel connected to this, you know, and our society is trying so hard to disconnect us from it, which just feels really fucked up.
Yeah, it's like I hate using this example, but it's like the Matrix, the agents, like
Exactly.
they don't want you to realize your full potential, because when you
Yeah.
tap into that sexual energy, in essence, you're connected to source. Like you're experiencing this power, but you realize, whoa, if I'm experiencing this power, imagine the creator, imagine God. And it humbles you.
Exactly. It humbles you, and it like, oh, it's like I think that's why I love that that, you know, in French, orgasm is like a small death, you know, like that's what the translation of it is. And it's like, but that's what sex can be, is like this death that just in dying in having, and right when we take psychedelics too, and we have these experiences of ego death, it's experiences of total connection to God, to the void, to the nothingness, to however you think of it, you know, or conceptualize of it. But it's like just melting, dissolving into that connection. And it's why I feel like pleasure is God, connecting to pleasure is connecting to God. Like these things are so much more connected than we give them credit for.
Yeah, that's really powerful. As a
Yeah.
sexual coach, what kind of topics do you kind of help your clients with, or kind of like help people with?
Yeah. So I work as an experiential sex and relationship coach, which is really fun. And people are often like, what is the experiential bit? Do you have sex with your clients? And I don't. But basically, I practice intimacy with people. So someone comes into my office or into my Zoom room because COVID, and what we do is we connect. Like we just connect as like human beings first and foremost. And what I'm doing as a coach is I'm thinking about like, what is challenging about connecting with this person, you know, like what tools could they have that would allow them to step into greater intimacy with me. Not, I'm not stepping in as like, I am, once again, my position is never like, I am the enlightened master. It's like, no, I'm a human with you in all of this, you know, and I'm going to connect to my erotic energy so that I can see how connected you are to your erotic energy, so that I can like see if I can feel you in my, if I can feel that connection, if I can feel your energy. If I can't, how can we connect you more to that energy? So that's usually where I'm starting with people, is like just connecting them back to their erotic energy, their sexual energy, their life force energy, teaching them how to like move that through their body and move throughout the day connected to that energy, you know. But that brings up so much shame for people and so many societal messages around like, you're not supposed to do that, especially if you're socialized as a woman like I was. Then you're told, or you're a slut, you're a tease, you're a this, you're a that. There's so many ways that then the message is like, no, clamp down on your sexual energy, you know. And so I just help people in opening up to more of themselves and facing what comes up in the process. So sometimes we have to do boundary work, and sometimes we have to do some work around trauma and triggers, you know, and emotional empowerment. And sometimes we have to actually play together, you know, and explore touch. And like, so sometimes I am teaching touch, and I'm teaching people how to touch me in a way that feels good, so that they can see what that experience is like to touch when their work, when their, you know, movement is in concert with their breath, and when they're slowing down and really connecting with me, you know, like how does that feel? So I'm really just trying to expand people's perception of what is possible in intimacy, and then like doing the very physical work of getting there instead of just talking about it. Because I'm like, oh, humans, we can talk, but sometimes we have to have an embodied experience of transformation for it to stick in a real way. And so that's what I do with people.
Wow, I think that's
Yeah,
really, what you're doing is really beneficial, because now people are learning, and they're not just hearing it, but they're seeing it. You know, we
exactly.
learn by doing, and what you're doing
Yeah,
is really beneficial. Do you
yeah,
ever
for
get,
sure.
how do I explain it? So obviously you just explained now, with a lot of your clients, you have to connect with them on an emotional level, and sometimes on a physical, intimate level. Do you ever get
Yeah.
to that point where you feel yourself connecting with that person, you want to connect even more outside of the workspace, or do you have to
Outside of
set that
the
boundary?
boundaries of the, yeah, I set very clear boundaries. Like I don't date clients, but I have crushes on all my clients, and everyone I work with, I have crushes on them. I love them. I adore them, you know, because that's the thing. I'm not showing up as like, play pretend. I'm actually allowing myself to connect. So of course my heart is like wide open. And sometimes clients also, want to experience more intimacy than the method allows. And then it's also sitting with the disappointment of that, which in and of itself is a hugely beneficial practice, because it's like, yeah, thank you for showing up in your desires. When we're in intimacy with people, we're not always going to get what we want. And that can be so disappointing. And it's a spiritual practice to sit with the disappointment, and still to stay in connection, not to let that be then like, oh, I want more connection than this container can offer, so bye, but it's like, no, can we still stay in connection while you're not getting 100% of your needs met?
Wow.
So yeah, it's intimate work. People fall in love, people have crushes, because we're human, and when we stop forming this rigidity around how our sexual expression or our energy is supposed to be shared, then it becomes quite easy to just like adore people, and really connect with them and fall in love with them. It's like super easy. Yeah.
That's amazing that not to say you've mastered it, but you're really tapping into your gifts. And that's really encouraging for someone out there who's listening right now. Then they can understand, if you have a gift, you should express it and make full use of it.
Absolutely. And explore the gifts that make you uncomfortable. Like, it hasn't always been this. I was so shut down from my sexual energy when I started this journey. So the journey has taken me into connection. And once again, then from that place of connection, being like, I want to share this with people. I didn't know that this was possible. Like, I want other people to know that this level of intimacy with themselves and with other people is possible, but that feels scary at times. I feel shame all the time. Like, oh, I'm expressing too much of my sexual energy, or, I'm a slut or whatever, insert the societal judgments, and then I can just lovingly own that, like, oh, okay, there's still a lot of shame there. Of course there is. You grew up in a society that constantly shamed your sexual expression. That's okay. Be compassionate with yourself and still show up and do the work, So it reminds me every day to like still show up and do the work, even when I'm afraid. I'm scared of rejection all the time when I'm working with people, like I'm always afraid of rejection because that's my own trauma. And so it gives me an opportunity to work through my own stuff too, in real intimacy with people, which is like such a gift, so powerful.
I love that. I love that with each experience, with each person you coach, it's a value exchange. They're gaining something from you, and
Exactly.
you're also gaining something from them.
I'm gaining a ton. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel that how do I explain it? Like your energy kind of gets a bit like dispersed, or like, not to say drained, or split with each connection with each person, where you fully giving yourself, and then now you have to do it with another person. Like, does it become a bit much, like overwhelming? That's the word.
So for me, yeah, I've definitely come up against, like, there have been times where I've been like, I'm just going to see 8 people in 1 week. And then at the end of that week, I'm like, I'm dead. Like I have absolutely no energy. So part of it for me is knowing what my boundaries are. I can work with 4 people a week maximum. And honestly, that number might even be going down, which is why I want to prioritize group work, classes, teaching, and not doing as much one-on-one work, because I just know that my energy gets very, yeah. But at the same time, each connection is so nourishing, like, because when I can show up and feel super vulnerable and still be seen by the person that I'm connecting with, and still be accepted by them, and still be loved by them, and be affirmed by them, like that in and of itself really nourishes that energy. So I also just have to be conscious about, am I working with people? Like, if I'm working with someone, I need to feel like a big yes in my body about working with them. I need to feel very turned on by the idea of working with them, like my erotic energy needs to be like, yes, that sounds fun. But if my erotic energy is like, I'm not really into this, then it's probably not a good client match.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
how as a sexual coach, right? How should someone
Yeah.
kind of communicate with their partner around mismatched sex drives?
Mm.
How does someone go about communicating that?
Yeah, it's one of those things. So I'll tell you what I would do as a coach, right? Is that one, we would talk about both people. So let's say it's you and I. You and I are in a couple, and I want to have sex all the time, and you really don't want to have sex, you know? I think first it's like having the conversation of like, can I hear your viewpoint? Like, can I just hear where you're coming from? Can I hear what is challenging for you about your experience of this dynamic? And can you hear what's challenging for me about my experience of this dynamic? Like, okay, if I'm the person with the really high sex drive, it can be really hard. Maybe I feel really rejected often because I'm initiating sex and I'm wanting this kind of intimacy with you and I'm not getting it, you know? And like, that's really hard. And if you notice, like, I'm not blaming you. I'm not telling you that you're bad or that you should just, hey, get a better, like, get a more defined whatever, you know. I'm not
Yeah.
shaming you. I'm just saying that, like, I'm honoring my feelings that, like, I feel rejected, you know, because that's real for me. Like,
Mm.
that is how I would feel, you know. And that doesn't mean that you're rejecting me. It just means that I have this huge rejection wound, and sometimes it gets triggered, you know, when I'm in intimacy with someone and I want more intimacy, because this happens to me all the time. I often want more intimacy than other people want, and that can be really hard to, you know, navigate. So first we're just like sitting with the feeling of whatever is challenging there, you know. And then eventually, once we've empathized with ourselves enough, and like as the coach, I'm just empathizing with you in whatever is challenging for you in this dynamic, so that you can have the conversation with your partner and say, like, this is what's challenging for me. But we would practice it. Like, if you see how I'm showing up in like my real feeling that
Mm.
like, I'm not like, oh, what would it, I'm like really sitting in that position and connecting to my real experiences of rejection and how that gets triggered for me. And I'm offering that to you so that, like, you can have a different perspective, lens, you know, and practice bringing that to your partner. But then it's also, yeah, then going to your partner, speaking vulnerably, you know, trying to listen with as much empathy as you can, and then seeing where, okay, I have a really high sex drive and I want to have sex every day, and you don't want to have sex every day. So I might want to outsource some of my needs. How does that feel to you? You
Mm.
know, I think it's just having those conversations in a way that isn't blaming, and it's hard to get there, you know, it is, which is why it can be beneficial to do it with the coach first. But yeah, like, this is challenging. Let's sit with the emotions of it. Let's show up for each other and work on how you can get your needs met and how I can get my needs met, and knowing that monogamy might not be the best vehicle for that, or it might be the vehicle, but I'm going to have to learn to live with a hell of a lot of disappointment if we choose monogamy as our vehicle, you know.
Mm.
And that might be a choice I'm willing to make, but it's just about exploring choices and not a right wrong. Like, I'm not saying any of these choices are better or worse. It's just what's going to work for you, what resonates with you, what feels aligned for you.
Yeah, you raise such a good
Yeah,
point about exploring the options and coming to like a ground level where everything works for the both of you.
exactly. Yeah. And that's hard because, like, partnerships are heated, you know. But and that's where it is beneficial to speak to a coach first and, like, just work through it and work through the emotions that come up for you in a safer container than, like, because sometimes there's so much trauma and triggering that's happened in partnership that, like, I bring that up, you immediately feel judged. Now you're responding defensively, which is making me feel more rejected, and then I'm super triggered, so I start getting mean because that's what I do when I feel defensive, and then you, and then we're here like escalating until it's just like, well, fuck both of you, and then we're totally disconnected and we can't find a way to come back together.
Yeah, well, that's very
Yeah,
true. That's very true. I guess, yeah,
yeah,
it's really important to have those conversations. I have a couple of more questions just with regards to sexual things.
yeah, I
So,
love questions.
so do you think that so when you engage with the sexual partner, right? Do you think that
Yeah.
there's soul ties, and that being with too many partners can kind of split that's like it hinders that, that your energy, if I'm correct?
That,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you so much for asking this question, because I have so many thoughts about this one. So this is my personal opinion. I don't believe in soul ties, and I'll tell you why. It's something that I've struggled with because I am in the spiritual community. You'll hear a ton of language about like soul ties and connections and da da da. And I'm also in a very sexually liberated community where we're like, how do we get our needs met, and what feels good to us, and how does that exist outside of monogamy? I personally feel, and once again, this is my personal perspective, but I feel that I am a divine being, and you are a divine being, and every other being on this earth is a divine being. Like, we're all aspects and manifestations of God. Even when at a human level, we do, all kinds of things that I can judge and I can shame and I can whatever, but at that core level, at a soul level, we are all manifestations of God. And the kind of sex that I want to have is really sex that deepens me in my connection to God. Like, where there's like a third or a fourth or a fifth person in the room, and that fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh person in the room is God, whatever order they come in, whether I'm having sex with one person or multiple. I really want there to be room for that, And so for me, that looks like really communicating with partners about what exactly I'm wanting from sex. This is something that's super discouraged, especially for for all people, but for people who are socialized as women, it's very hard to be like, and I want you to do exactly this, and this is how I want to feel, and this is how I want you to touch me, and this is how, but I go into those things so that I know what kind of sexual encounter I'm stepping into, but I also step into partnerships, and I've been celibate for 2 years. I haven't been doing this for a while.
So you've been
But
celibate for 2 years?
for
Wow.
2 years, yeah, while I've been going through this whole thing, it's been wild. So a lot of my thinking is like, how am I gonna engage in partnerships after this whole period, and a lot of that is being really upfront about my needs and my wants and my desires, and knowing that I'm going into a container to get a lot of those met, like I'm very into getting all of my needs met. And so creating the different containers for that kind of need meeting to happen, with people who are manifestations of God. And so I don't feel like there's any, for me, it's like when we're having sex, we're God connecting with God. Like, I don't feel like there's any tension there. But I respect everyone's, beliefs. The only thing that I don't like about soul ties is sometimes it does register to me as a bit like slut shaming, like, don't have sex with many people, like, don't do it, because there are going to be these soul ties. And for most of human history, like for the anatomically modern human is 200,000 years old. We've kind of bought into monogamy in the last 10,000 years, but often, much sooner, depending on where you are in the world. Before that, people were just having lots of sex with lots of people. There's a great book about this called Sex at Dawn for anyone who's listening and wants to learn more about the history of sex. It's fascinating. It like should be in every school curriculum. But I just always remember that, like, oh, we come from a species that loves to have sex, that has in many ways been designed to have sex and to have sex with multiple partners. And we've come from societies where that's been normalized, And so I feel like those societies were not like, there was no weird, and in many ways, those societies were far more egalitarian than our society is today. Our society right now, with the levels of sexual repression that we're experiencing, there's so much violence, there's so much absolute nonsense happening around us. Whereas we lived in societies where people had lots of sex, and I'm not saying it's entirely because of having lots of sex, but people had lots of sex and knew how to live in right relation to one another and to respect one another and to respect the earth. And that's kind of the society I want to move us towards, like being in right relation to each other, to the earth, and having lots of sex if that appeals to us. Because also, I think in sex positivity, we can like shame people for not wanting to be sex positive in the ways that we are sex positive, and trying to create like one lens of sex positivity. And that's absolute bullshit. Like, one person might not want to ever have sex in their life, one person might want to have sex all the time, and neither of those are wrong as long as they're aligned with your truth and your authenticity, you know?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I think it kind of works both ways, like in terms of soul ties, like you mentioned, like you tend to think that with soul ties, the main focus is on women and slut shaming. But I think it works with both.
Yeah.
Like, if in terms of soul ties, like even with men, you can kind of question men, like you don't have to have sex with multiple partners. Because in my view, that I think that
Yeah.
when you share your sexual energy, like you're giving yourself to that person, like you're giving your soul. This is me. This is
Yeah.
me. And if you're going to be sharing yourself with so many people, I think that your energy is going to become a bit contaminated. And
But I push back
okay,
very
yeah,
lovingly.
push back.
So,
Yeah,
so what I would say is like, so you and I have just had this cool conversation about how our sexual energy can be everywhere. In me creating Human Becoming podcast, I'm sharing my sexual energy with the world and my erotic energy. In creating the school, in creating anything that I create in my life, any art, any whatever, my erotic energy is always there. But in those situations, when I work with a, for example, I love my clients. I exchange a lot of erotic energy with them. And yet, like, I don't feel like there's a contamination that happens there. And maybe that's my, once again, personal opinion. And I love that we can both have our own, but yeah, I feel like for me, it's like, oh, if my sexual energy is everywhere, I'm always sharing it. Like there's never a time where I'm not sharing my sexual energy. And if it was getting contaminated, then like, I think for me, I would have felt it. But I think that's where it's like, you're allowed to engage, like your sexual energy might want you to protect it. And my sexual energy might be like, freedom to the people, let's share it with everyone.
yeah, I get
And
you.
neither of those is bad. It's
Yeah,
just like, is it you? And I guess for me, when people talk about soul ties, I'm like, have as much or as little sex as you want with whoever you want to.
yeah.
Love that for you. However, are there any, what I would explore with a client is like, are those messages, is that aligned with your true desire, like your internal desire? Or is that what you think you should do, or what like is ideologically right? And what I really want people to do is like to free their desires, just to be like, what is the freest expression of this? And that could look like freedom with one person, and that's okay. Or freedom with two, or freedom with 10. Like I want to have a community of like 50 lovers that meet all of my sexual needs, and that's fine. And
Yeah,
you might be like, I'm content with a person, and that's fine too.
yeah,
And I love that we can all have different ways that sexual liberation looks for us, and like neither of those is bad, they just are.
yeah. That's amazing, and I get what you're saying, and it's a really good point. What advice would you give to someone that kind of, how do I explain it, uses sex as a form of, so like they're a sex addict, right? But they use it as a form of escapism. So like some
Mm,
people, in terms of using drugs, they use escapism. Some people use sex as an escapism. What advice would you give to that
exactly.
person?
Okay. Another thing I love speaking about. So I think we live in a society where oftentimes we see we demonize specific kinds of addiction. Like if you're addicted to sex, or if you're addicted to plant medicines, there's a very specific stigma there. But if you're addicted to being on your phone, if you're addicted to checking your emails an obsessive amount of times a day, like I am, if you're addicted to running, some people have unhealthy addictions to food, to exercise. Like some people run as like anything in this world can be an addiction, right? And I think, so what I would say to anyone battling with addiction, if that manifests in sex, if that manifests in another place, is be so gentle and compassionate with yourself, because all addiction, and this is what people are really, studies are starting to find, that we don't know where shame begins and addiction ends. Like we don't know how entangled shame and addiction are. But what we're finding is that like shame is a huge piece of the addiction puzzle, and that what really prevents people from healing is that shame. you know. And so what I would say is just like really watch where you're, because what happens is someone, let's say I'm struggling with a porn addiction, then I'm watching porn, then I'm shaming myself because I'm like, that's so bad, you shouldn't have done that, you're not supposed to do that. So I feel really awful. But it's the only way. Addictions really are, they come from us trying to soothe ourselves. Like that's the only way you know how to soothe yourself in a world that isn't supporting you. So like it totally makes sense. I'm someone who struggled with addiction. Like I have a lot of compassion in my heart for addiction, you know, and how much we're struggling with the world. But the thing that's helped me when I've struggled with addiction is, oh my God, how can I be so loving with myself and know that I'm engaging in this behavior that I recognize might be destructive to me or not aligned with my values. I'm engaging in this behavior because it's the only way I know how to soothe myself, how to take care of myself, how to like bring some calm into my body, you know? And so can I start finding other things? Can I start looking for other of support while not judging myself? Because so often with the, and then we just go back into the cycle, you know, because you shame yourself, something really intense happens that you don't have the support to process. What are you going to do? Go back to the thing that comforts, you know. So for anyone who's struggling with an addiction, if that manifests as a sex addiction, if that manifests as another kind of addiction, be gentle with yourself. Also, check out the work of Dr. Gabor Mate. He writes a lot about addiction with a really compassionate focus and heart. And it's personally changed my life and how I see addiction, how I relate to it in myself and in other people.
Oh, I love that, especially about the part about just being empathetic. I think that's
Oh,
also another
yeah.
thing in society that's frowned upon. Being empathetic to people is also a strength.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. It really, and it's also a skill that we're not taught. You know, like I think we're taught to have the critic that lives in our head, you know, that's constantly telling us that we're not good enough, that we're bad, that we're unworthy of love, we're unworthy of connection, unworthy of belonging, you know, unworthy of acceptance. Like that is so programmed into us. But it's so hard for many of us to access I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of connection. And so what happens is addiction becomes this way to soothe a lot of those underlying, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of connection. I'm not worthy of acceptance. Like one of the only ways I can dull or numb myself or receive that connection is in these really intense moments. And then it's like, oh, what happens when I am worthy of love? I am worthy of connection. I am worthy of being seen and being accepted, not for being perfect, but for being who I am, for being in this messiness of, you know, like people who are experiencing addictions often don't seek help because of shame, right? Because no one's going to love me if they see this evil, dark part of myself. And it's like, that's part of who you are. Can you love it? That's the spiritual practice, you know?
That's so true. I mean, just to bring it back to the beginning,
Yeah,
how you were going through those dark periods, and it's like in retrospection, you realize that everything that's happening to you is not happening to you; it's happening for you. And that once
exactly.
you understand that, you actually realize like, whoa, a lot of life is you coming to this realization of you having to journey towards being the person that you were born to be. Like you have to unlearn
Exactly.
so many things that were projected on you. Those things aren't you. So it's about you becoming into the person that you are and realizing that at the end of the day, you are love, you are abundant, you are powerful, you are worthy, you know? And it's just about
Yeah.
affirming those things and each day recognizing that it's going to be a challenge, but that's how each day comes with an evolvement, how you're going to be evolving from the person that you were from the day before.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, you made raise such an interesting point about how we have to deal with past life trauma. Do you want to explain what that is?
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. So in my this is once again one of those places where I'm like, in my opinion, in my view, because I know not everyone necessarily believes in past lives or connects to their past lives. I know I have been here many times. I think many of us at this point in human history know that we have been here, know that we may be coming back, know that maybe we've been in other places too. Like, I don't think Earth is the only place on Earth, the only place in the universe and in the multiverse for life to manifest. I think that one, I'm like, of course humans think that we're the only life forms in the world, in the universe. But often what happens is that that trauma of what we've experienced in a past life, whether it's how we've died, or just something we experienced in our family system, in our life, something that challenged us, comes with us to this lifetime to be resolved here. Because I do believe that the way that God and the universe is working, we're always moving towards healing. Like, we are always trying to integrate more of the darkness. We are always trying to embody more of the light. We are always trying to come into, a deeper state of being healed. And for me, I came into this lifetime with like a ton of trauma. I had this healer when I was very young, who started to have visions of how I was killed in my past life, like just started to have all these dreams and visions. Eventually shared it with my mom, did a bunch of healing with me on like trying to release myself from like the limiting beliefs of that life. Because sometimes we're working with our limiting beliefs from this life, we don't realize they're limiting beliefs from others that we're still to heal, And so in that life, I was murdered really by my community for stepping into my spiritual embodiment, being called a witch, but really we know that like for so many people, that's just been being the embodiment of spirit, connecting with the earth. And especially with European history, that's been super demonized. And so a lot of my fear in this lifetime is about not being supported, is like about not being in connection with people, because I've had such intense experience of being like totally abandoned and rejected by my community in this very final way, in this like life-ending way, and what I find, especially when I use psilocybin as a medicine, especially recently, I've started my consciousness expands into an understanding of a trauma from another life, or literally seeing something. Like, I've seen lives where my entire community has been killed, like where I've seen these early experiences of colonization and what that did at a soul level. We speak about colonization as this big impersonal project, and it's like, what did that actually feel like for the first people to experience that kind of violence? And so a lot of my work isn't just healing this life stuff. I think it's all my lifetime stuff culminating here. And then I'm like, oh, hello, fear of not being supported. Hello, fear of being abandoned. Hello, fear of being rejected. Or I have a deep fear of stepping into my spirituality because I've experienced the trauma of being totally rejected by society for embodying a more spiritual beingness. So it's something that I think, psychedelics definitely help us to, or entheogenic medicines really help us to explore. And I hope people do more of that. It's really rewarding. It's so rewarding.
Whoa, that must be like, not to say like intense, but
It is.
yeah, intense. But also
Yeah,
like, does it become daunting every day knowing that you've experienced this past life trauma and you seeing those visions, you're doing exactly what's going on, but obviously you haven't
exactly.
experienced that final outcome.
Yeah. I've not died. And I
Yeah,
don't think that's my journey in this life. I think my journey in this life is learning that I get to embody my power, and I get to embody all of it without conditions, and I still get to be accepted, and I still get to be a member of the society, and I still get to bring my voice into the world. But like, sometimes I cry often. I'm a big crier. I'm a big advocate for people crying. But sometimes I do, when I'm doing a lot of this work that makes me feel so vulnerable and scared. I just get in my bed and I sob and I feel into that fear, and know that it is alive in me, but that I'm actively healing it by continuing to show up and do the work, So yeah, it is. It's like hard. It can be tough to always keep the big picture in mind, but it also feels really badass when I'm like, wow, I just like broke through an edge, or like this thing that's been so limiting for many lifetimes isn't impacting me anymore. Like my soul is growing, I'm evolving, I'm changing. And that's really, to me, is like the most exciting thing about being here on earth, is just that ability to learn and grow and change, and know that it will still continue. I'm not going to arrive at perfection in this lifetime. Like I get to go be on other planets, and I get to be other life forms, and I get to learn in different ways, and I get to do that until there's nothing, until, you know, everything returns to nothingness.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I mean,
Yeah.
you raise such a good point, how sometimes it's, you experience these intense emotions and you often try to repress it, but you just have to just literally cry it out, and just feel through it. There's
Yeah.
reminds me of, I don't know if you watch Midnight Gospel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love Midnight Gospel.
I think it's the last episode with his mom and how she's teaching him that sometimes you just have to cry. Just let it out,
Yeah.
and through that you release it. And now hearing his talk, I can understand how the link comes in with generational trauma. And I think, I don't want to assume anything, but I think that why you're here is that you're here, break these bondages, break these generational
Exactly.
chains.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think all of us, to an extent, are here at this time on the planet to do that. Like, I think there is this big, we're needing a lot of us to negotiate this shift so that we can move into a different way of being human. But I also remember, I'm like, oh, some of the shit that I'm working with is thousands of years in the making, some of these generational wounds, some of these traumas, And so even when it feels heavy, it's like, of course it feels heavy. You're one human who's been alive for 20 something years, and you're like upset that you're still feeling the effects of thousands of years of repression. Of course you are, So for me, it's also like, I know that I'm processing all of those wounds, not just for myself, but for my ancestors, that's why I've come to this specific lineage, and chosen to incarnate here, is also so that is because our wounding matches up. The wounding that needs to be healed is also the wounding that I, at a soul level, need to heal.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I'm just really grateful for this moment. There's like,
Yeah, no, me too.
I was like
Yeah.
reflecting and on this like Chinese proverb. It's called Ichige Ichio, which basically when translated means this moment exists now and now alone will never happen again. And when you reflect on it's like, whoa, like you sometimes just have to cherish these moments and just be grateful that you were able to connect. And I'm grateful now able to connect to someone
Me
like you.
too. Yeah, no, me too. And that, I love seeing you like breathe and take a moment to breathe throughout this conversation. Also reminded me just to be like, and just being here is enough and is beautiful. And, and in and of itself, this is such a teaching moment, like there's so much that I have learned. I think that's what's so magical about this journey, is there's so much that I have learned and healed just in this hour, like there's so much that's probably coming into my awareness so that I can learn things, unlock new doors for myself, unlock new possibilities. So it's just like, thank you for being the beautiful, magnificent human that you are, and for bringing your gifts into the world, and for connecting with me.
You're welcome. I think
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, so what 3 keys would you give to a 19-year-old version of yourself in terms of navigating life? And just, yeah, 3 keys.
Oh my God. Easy. Trust, faith, surrender. It's just that. Just trust. Trust in the fact that you are guided, that you are loved in ways that you cannot even conceptualize, that you are cared for, that you are here for a reason. Like, trust in all of that, and trust in your knowing. Oh, that would be a big thing, like, trust that your vision is your desires. All of them are manifesting for a reason, and it's not just like, you're not just crazy. And faith, like, have faith and trust are so connected, and they're so connected to surrender too. It's about this, like, I know that I'm here for a reason, because I get so much anxiety about, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be doing more? Like I'm constantly in that anxious spiral, or not consciously, but at some points I have been so consistently there. Uh, and it's just like, trust that you're here for a reason, have faith that you're here for a reason, surrender to the universe and how it's wanting to move through you, surrender to the role that you're being asked to play. Let go. Like, don't try to control everything. You're gonna be able to control nothing. So just like, be with the river. Don't swim upstream. That's a constant reminder for me now too. All of these are things I say to myself every day, because that's really, I think, like every time I think I can control the outcome, or I can like map my future and how I want it to be, it's just like the universe has got you. Can you trust in that? And then can you let go to that and just let each step of the process unfold? And that's like my everyday spiritual practice. So always coming back to that one.
Love that. I love that, especially about letting go. That's something I've learned this year, especially that like sometimes you really just have to relinquish control and understand that whenever you try to do things your way, like it goes to what you're saying, that you don't want to be going upstream, like you just gotta flow. And that
Literally, yeah.
really, especially on my spiritual journey so far, like I've come to understand that, you can make many plans, but at the end of the day, the Lord determines your steps, and that God's in control. And that you just got to appreciate where you are right now and give him recognition and understand that he's going to get you where you need to go, and that you're still here for a reason, and you're not going until he's done with you.
Yeah. And it's like what you said, everything happens in your service, which I think is a very hard spiritual teaching to embody, because it's like, even this, like when really awful things happen, but it's like everything is happening in your service. You can't see it, like sometimes I just have to do that. I'm like, I have no idea. I can't see God's big perspective right now. Sometimes I can if I'm really intentional about it, but I'm not necessarily like every moment of the day, like I see it. I see what you're doing here, God, So it's just like, trust that there is someone with that big picture view. And if something doesn't work out here, like I judge myself for failure all the time. And I've been working on just saying like, even failure is service, because failure is God showing us that wasn't your place, So of course it wasn't going to work out, because that's not where you're meant to be, but it feels like, God, I trusted you. I wanted this thing to happen so badly and it didn't, and I'm frustrated. But always just trusting in that big picture, in that bird's eye view, because there is someone, there is a being, there is energy that is coordinating all of this, and it's so much easier to let go to that than to be like, I am God. Like I play God all the time, and I'm like, you're not God. You are God, and you're not God. It's complicated, but yeah.
Yeah, you raised such a cool point. It reminds me of this book by Dr. Sue Morter, The Energy Codes. So
Mm,
she sees life as like a bus stop conversation, right? So picture
mm,
yourself at a bus stop, you entering the bus, there are like a bunch of other passengers there, and you're all making this journey towards Earth. Now,
yeah.
this is just your spirit now. So it ties back into past lives and everything. So
Mm,
you're in this bus stop, you're talking to the passenger on the next to you, and like, what are you going to Earth to do? And then you tell that person, okay, I'm going to go to Earth to experience forgiveness on a scale of 10. So
yes.
now you have that conversation and start. Now the bus stops, drops you off at Earth. Now you're living now as a human being. Now you're going through your life, and now you experience all these things, pain, loss.
Yo,
And now you're asking yourself, why am I experiencing these things? But it's what you asked for on the bus stop, to experience
exactly.
forgiveness. Now you have to learn to forgive those people who hurt you and those people who made you suffer so much. And what you find in retrospection, that same person that you were having that conversation next to, that passenger, was that person that made you feel all those things.
Yeah.
But that was what we talked about on the bus. Like we both agreed that I'm going to do these things to you so you can experience that forgiveness at a level 10.
Yeah, yeah. No, but it's so, and I think that's also why then when we get caught up in why am I not like this person or comparing ourselves to other people, it's like you don't know what, or maybe you do, but like connect to the part of yourself that knows what you came here to experience, and then like live from that place, because it does, you get down here and you're like, you did this awful thing, you suck. Like how could I have had to go through this lesson? But you don't realize, I do feel like most of the shit that we experience here, if not all of the shit that we experience, once again, my personal view in my life is that it's all been in my service, that it's all been, even the things that have been awful, the abandonment shit, the like, oh my god, some awful things, but that have all been to bring me closer to whatever I came here for.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I'm actually gonna
Yeah.
keep that with me.
The thing that I think you'd enjoy this, but sometimes I think of this as like a psilocybin journey. Like we're on the bus and then we're like, set the intention. Oh, the intention is I'm gonna experience forgiveness level 10. And then you take the psilocybin mushrooms and then you go down onto earth, and earth is the whole psilocybin journey, and you're here on earth and things seem weird, but it's because you're in a trip, and then you die and you're like, oh my God, it was a trip the whole time. Like that's what I was doing the whole time. And did I meet my intention? But it very much feels like that. And then we're just doing that all the time as souls. We're just like, mushrooms, what's your intention? What's mine? Let's go into this lifetime together. And we dive in.
Yeah, it's really wavy if you think about it in
Yeah,
perspective.
it is. Yeah.
I think before we end off, there's someone that really, they were the person that really showed me your content. Her name is Cindy.
Oh.
And she really said that you're just like a powerful being, and that when she watches your content through the technology, she can really feel like the essence of your being. And she wants you to say thank you for being vulnerable and having the courage to show up in your true form, self authenticity every day and every time on your podcast. So she just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, wow, thank you. I just love affirmation, truly. Like that's my big love language. But it just makes me really happy. And I suppose for everyone listening, I would just want people to know that that's all you have to do. Like you don't have to do anything else but show up authentically and vulnerably to be powerful and to make an impact on this world, like just be yourself. And that's the greatest gift that you could give any of us. So I'm grateful for the people who affirm that inside of me.
Yeah. I also want to make sure that you get some value out of this as well. So for the people listening, where can they find more of your content on socials?
Oh, so you can go to my Instagram, Tumi.Moloto. You can go to @Human Becoming Podcast. It's not the Human Becoming Podcast. I think it's just @Human Becoming Podcast. And that is where you can see, the whole Human Becoming project and what I'm doing there. And those would be the main ways to connect with me, like Instagram. I love connecting with people on Instagram. So if you're curious about what I do and, all of my little projects, then follow me on Instagram.
Cool. And I just wanted to
Yeah.
end by saying thank you so much. I really am grateful for you being vulnerable in this episode and really just expressing who you are as a person. You are a really powerful person. And I hope that you continue to live out your purpose and continue to provide healing for so many beings out there and continue to connect more and spread this light that you're offering the world.
Thank you. I hope so too, God willing, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I think
No, thank you.
yeah, I'm gonna stop recording now and cool.